Hi, this is Joe Chambers. Welcome to Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage. This week's guest is Bob Berryhill, guitarist, founder of the surf band The Safaris. When we come back, Bob Berryhill. Welcome to Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage with Bob Berryhill. Bob, thank you so much for coming in.
Well, it's certainly my pleasure to be here.
Next month, you're going to be one of the newest inductees in Musicians Hall of Fame at our induction ceremony.
That's going to be an awesome experience. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, we are too. It's always a lot of fun, and it's not just, a lot of people think because we're in Nashville, it's just country music, but it's, one time before we had Dick Dale, we inducted Dick in, I think it was 2008 or 9, I forgot now. So it's fun to have some surf music back into the...
Well, surf music is one of those kind of things that makes people happy when they hear it because it's exciting. It was originally dance music. And so when people want to get up and dance, that's the kind of music I love to hear.
Most every musician wants to know, how did you get started?
Well, when I was 8 years old, my parents gave me a beautiful silver-toned acoustic guitar with the strings about that high off the neck. And that was my dad's guitar. But really it wasn't until I was 13, in 1960, my dad took myself, my mom, and my older sister to Hawaii. And we proceeded to go to the Kaiser Hawaiian Village Hotel. And then that night we went to a Hawaiian luau show. And about halfway through, a gentleman came out with an ukulele. And I looked at my dad and I said, "Dad, I want to do that." We finally got home and went to a little music store there in Glendora, California, where we lived, and went up to the counter and said to the man, I'd like to learn more about ukulele. And they said, "Well, we don't have an ukulele teacher, but we have a guitar teacher." I went back in the back and there was this beautiful lady who had a blonde Telecaster. And she said, "Well, we're going to learn to read music." And I said, "Well, that's cool," because I hadn't had that opportunity yet. And the first 2 weeks, she had me already doing recitals. I'm in 7th grade when I first start. And then in 8th grade, we had a talent show. And in that same show, another act that came up right after me was Jim Fuller and Pat Conley. So they played together and borrowed my equipment. That was kind of how I got started really getting excited about the guitar.
How did the Safaris, how did it happen?
So what happened was Jim Fuller, Pat Conley, the other two members of the Safaris, played instruments, came over to my house, and we sat there in the early afternoon and played every song. I played a lot of Ventures, and Jim Fuller knew the whole Dick Dale catalog, so we kind of backed each other up on these songs, and Pat was playing my Telecaster, trying to play bass. He never had a bass, but he kept playing along. And we said, "Okay, that's really great, guys. Thanks for coming over." They said, "Well, hang on a second, Bob. We've got a concert tonight. Would you like to go and play with us?" I said, "Wow, okay, where is it?" He said, "Well, it's at Pomona Catholic High School. And it's going to be an after football game in the gym." But I said, "We don't have a drummer." "Well, we're going to meet the drummer there." So, here's a band that's going to show up and play for the first time with a drummer who doesn't know any of your songs. You don't know what he plays like or anything. But there was Ron Wilson, the drummer on Wipeout, setting his drums underneath the basketball net, because they didn't swing it up out of the way. They just set us up. He had a Ludwig set, like a 3-piece type set, very simple. And we started playing, and the crowd loved it and said, "Hey, we want to hear more of that." So that's how the band started.
What was the next progression after that? You started having band practice, you started getting booked for gigs. When did you start writing songs? What was the progression?
Well, what happened was that Jim Fuller and Pat Conley and I knew a man named Dale Smallin. He was my scoutmaster when I was about 12. They said, "We know Dale Smallin. He's gonna help manage us." I said, "Okay, cool." So we went over to his. He had a video studio and photography studio in Azusa, California. So my dad drove us all over there with my equipment one night. We set up in there, and Ronnie showed up, and we started rehearsing in his studio. And we did that from September, October, and then about the 1st of November, he said, "Hey, I've got some gigs. why don't we play this gig? So it was a teen center in those days. So we started playing some small teen centers. And then one night, Ron Wilson comes into the rehearsal and goes, "Hey, Bob, I had a dream about a song called Surfer Joe." And I go, "Wow, that's cool," because we'd never written a song before. And Ronnie goes in the drums, just starts playing the drums. And I said, "Well, we better come up with a key and an arrangement." So I started in G, started playing this arrangement for Surfer Joe. And he starts singing the song. We get the verse down and the chorus down. And after we had 5 verses of this song, got it all up. And then Ronnie said, "I need some help in the final couple of verses." So we kind of sat down then and kind of wrote up the last final couple of verses where Surfer Joe joins Uncle Sam's Marines today. So we got that stuff done. And then we got it all done, and our manager, Dale, goes, "Hey, that's a cool song. It's kind of a Beach Boy kind of thing. Why don't we go and record it?" We go, "Cool. We're going to go to Hollywood." He said, "Well, not really. You guys can't afford that." So anyway, we end up showing up in my driveway one night, December of 1962. So we've been playing since September, October, and November. In December of '62, Ron Wilson, Pat Conley, and Jim Fuller show up in my driveway, and Dale Smollin's there. He says, "Okay, boys, let's go, but we need some money." I ask everybody, "Well, do you have any money?" And everybody goes, "No." He says, "Well, if you don't have $150, we're not going." So I went, I went in the house and I asked my mom for $150 right there. And $150 in 1962 was like 2 weeks' wages for an average worker. And so my mom brought out her Western Bank checkbook in blue and wrote out a check for $150, wrote it out to Dale Smallin. I took it out and said, "Okay, boys, we're going." And we drive on out. And we're going, instead of turning left on Highway 66 to go to LA, we turn right to go to Cucamonga. It's an old shoe store with the glass on the sides. And we knock on the door, and it's like inner sanctum, this squeaky door opens up, and there's this little guy, looks like a leprechaun, and his name was Paul Buff. Found out later that he was kind of the godfather of music, of surf music recording, because he was the guy, he was cheap, and he would get the job done, and he played his studio like he was the instrument. He made all his own equipment. He was an ex-Marine trained on electronics. He built his own studio, built his own equipment, had his own lathe with a vacuum sweeper on it to pull the chips off when it went around. He made his console out of his mother's boudoir dresser. He brought that in and made his own console. So it was a real advanced studio, man. I mean, it was like ancient looking, but it worked. He knew how to make organ. It was a 1/4 inch reel to reel going on in monaural. It wasn't even stereo. So here we are mixing basically 3 tracks down to 1 to get a master. So anyway, we get in, we set up, and here comes Pat Conley, walks in with a bass guitar. I go, "Where'd you get that?" He said, "Well, I borrowed it from my cousin." It's the first night he ever played bass guitar. So we started playing Surfer Joe. It's a vocal, right? But we didn't play vocal. Ronnie kind of mouthed the words and we followed along, got the track done for that. And then Ronnie goes over to the microphone, which was set up in the other side of the room, and he plays the track back and Ronnie sings Surfer Joe. We're all done. And they said, "Okay, boys, you need a second song for your 45.
And right there, we're going to take a break.
Okay.
And we'll be right back.
The Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum has been celebrating the men and women who make the music of our lives since 2006. The Musicians Hall of Fame is the one and only museum in the world that honors the talented musicians who played on the greatest recordings of all time.
It's a music city, huh? It's, where else are you going to get the cats, all the cats that are in this room?
The Grammy Museum Gallery at the Musicians Hall of Fame is an interactive facility that allows guests to explore the process of making a recording. Take drum lessons with Ringo Starr. Sing on stage with Ray Charles. Write a song with Desmond Child. Rap with Nelly. Or be Garth Brooks in our recording studio experience. Located in the heart of downtown Nashville, in the first floor of the historic Nashville Municipal Auditorium. Come see what you've heard at the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum.
Hi, I'm Tyler Rudesheim, Director of Events at the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum. Located within the historic Nashville Municipal Auditorium, the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum is one of the most unique spaces in downtown Nashville, offering a versatile environment that caters to events of all sizes. Your guests will love this truly Nashville experience. We specialize in corporate dinners, music industry events, receptions, and more. Contact me today to book your next event. Hi, I'm Tyler Rudesheim, Director of Events at the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum. Located within the historic Nashville Municipal Auditorium, the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum is one of the most unique spaces in downtown Nashville, offering a versatile environment that caters to events of all sizes. Your guests will love this truly Nashville experience. We specialize in corporate dinners, music industry events, receptions, and more. Contact me today to book your next event.
Welcome back to Musicians Hall of Fame with Bob Berryhill. So Bob, we took a break. You were in the studio. You just finished Surfer Joe. You need a B-side. What happened?
Well, the talkback button, I learned what that was for. The engineer, Paul Buff, pushes it down and goes, "Boys, you need a second song for your 45. We said, well, we hadn't written another song. And he says, well, we can put Surfer Joe on both sides of the 45, or you write another song. And so he lets up in the talkback. We look at each other, and Ronnie starts going. And I said, well, we better put some guitar and bass on that, or it's going to be a drum solo. Because Ronnie was an excellent cadence marching drummer for the Charter Oak and Glendora High School marching bands. And he could just play all night long. In fact, he has a drum solo 104 hours long that he completes, a Guinness World Record thing. But anyway, so Ronnie was that kind of a guy. Short, stocky, really strong, played with sticks, huge sticks. He would just beat up things. But anyway, he starts playing this thing and I go, well, it's cool. We'll do some drum breaks. I chose the key of B, as in boy, because every song we'd played to that point was in the key of A or E. I said, let's do something different. I slid up to a tenor, and I love grand bar chords, so I started playing the chords to it, and the bass player goes da-da-da, da-da-da-da, da-da-da, and Jim Fuller goes da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da, just picked it up. Jim was an excellent mimic. He could pick anybody's melody up and play it almost instantly. So he started playing it, and I said, okay, let's break, bam, and the drum solo came in, and then bang, and so we put all these power chords in it, got it on a basic arrangement, and they said, okay, that's one, go back, let's record it one more time, because we just wrote the song, right? And he wrote it, and we did it again, and they said, okay, boys, for good measure, let's do it one more time. So now we had it pretty well orchestrated, so it was starting out really smooth, the bass coming in, da-da-da-da, it was really starting to rock, really going on, and then finally we get through with the 3 or 4 verses with a lead part and everything, and it worked really great. We're all done, and he goes, okay, boys, on the talkback button, what are you going to call it? Well, Jim Fuller had gone to Tijuana, which is just over the border, for the weekend before, pulled out of his pocket a switchblade. He walks up to the mic that we sang Surfer Joe on and goes, click, switchblade. Now, any sound engineer will go, that click is terrible, needs something more. So my dad goes out into the back of the studio, into the alleyway, brings in a cement-soaked piece of plywood. Well, the bass player, Pat Conley, picks it up and breaks it over the microphone. And I go, wow, that sounds like a bustin' surfboard. And we go, wow, that's cool. But I said, there's already a song called Bustin' Surfboards. So we couldn't use that. So I said, well, what would cause it to break? Something like Goofy going over the falls, and crashing. Well, Dale Smallin gets out of the control room, walks around to that very same mic, and goes, ha 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 ha, wipe out. One time. That was it. So we have the crack, the laugh, and the song. 2 weeks later, we have a 45. So we're like in January of '63 then. And he makes 100 copies and brings them to me, and everybody gives us these 25. And they said, boys, what do you want to do with that? I said, well, I want to get it on the radio, because I had gone and I'd done down at the Cliffy Stone Jamboree, and I knew that you need records on the radio and television to become hits. You got to do something. So he said, okay. So The other guys took their song. I took mine. I said, get these to disc jockeys and TV shows and other people. They took it around to Art LeBeau, which was a big oldies but goodies guy, and he didn't like it. So we said, oh man, that's not good. So we took it to Capitol. They didn't like it. Took it to several. They didn't like it. Well, one day, out at the studio at Powell Studios, where there was a record distributor came by. His name was George Hoka. He came into the studio and said, Dale, to the engineer, do you have any new songs? He said, yeah, I've got this one by the Safaris. It's called Wipeout, Surfer Joe. Why don't you take that to Hollywood? So he takes it to LA to Merritt Distributing Company, and there's Richard Delvey, the drummer for the Challengers, sitting at this desk where he worked. And he said, check this out. He puts it on, plays Surfer Joe. He goes, well, that's cool, but let me see what the other side's like. Played Wipeout, fell in love with it. He says, I like that song. He calls his buddy, John Maniscalco, who was a record producer, did Good Golly Miss Molly, and a bunch of other songs, Robin Hood Music Company. And he says, John, you need to produce this one. It's a great song. So he said, he listened to it, came down, listened to it. He said, yeah, I'll put that on my record label, Princess. So they pressed it on Princess, but they re-edited it. They took we had a long extended version of Wipeout and a long extended 5 verses of Surfer Joe, where he cut 2 of the verses off of Surfer Joe and faded out Wipeout to make it 2 minutes, 20 seconds, because AM radio wouldn't play it if it was any longer than that. So they chopped it up and started sending it around. Had a little success, but nothing. And then one night, John Maniscalco's, according to John, I wasn't there, he told me this story. He says, I was in this restaurant, and this was really nice waitress came over to the table and started talking to us and asked us what we did. Because this is in Hollywood, right? North Hollywood. And she goes, what do you guys do? And he says, well, we produce records. Well, you got any good records? I can send to a DJ I know, Johnny Hyde, in Fresno, California. And he says, yeah, here it is. He gave it to the girl. She sends it to Johnny Hyde. Well, Johnny Hyde in those days at midnight had a Make It or Break It show where they played new records. And so midnight on Tuesday night, they played Wipeout. Turned out to be the 5th most important record of the night. The next night, they played it Wednesday night. It became the number 1 most important record of the night. And so the next day on Thursday, the lawyer for Dot Records knows Johnny Hyde, calls him and says, did you break any good records? I'd like to hear them. He says, yeah, I got this one, Wipeout. So he said, good, send it to me. So he mails it back to North Hollywood. It goes into the office, and Randy Wood, the president of Dot Records, says, that's a hit. Call them in and we'll sign them. So they the 2 publishers, Delvey and Maniscalco, all go in there and they sign, and Wipeout's put on Dot Records. And then they came to my house in March of '63 and had us sign contracts that said we were signing with their label and they were signing with Dot. Well, what we found out was they gave us $250, they got $750. They didn't share much of it. So anyway, it gets on Dot. So we're talking March of '63, and so they started putting it on the radio stations and started pushing it, because Dot was really good at pushing singles in those days. So by August of '63, it's number 1 in Los Angeles. So 6 months to 8 months, we were suddenly playing with the Beach Boys, Roy Orbison, Paul and Paula, and we were on TV shows the whole rest of the year until about November, Thanksgiving. We got to go and travel to Hawaii. That's the second time I've been there. And that was the beginning of our sort of a skyrocketing career right there.
And did you guys get paid? I mean, did the record label pay you?
Well, initially we were signed to Dot, and we got our $200. And we thought that was great because we'd never made any money before that. And then they said in around June of '63, they said, you need an album to follow your 45. So we went to the recording studio back to Cucamonga and recorded one day all of the 12 sides for that record, Yakety Yak, and all the songs that were on there, Green Onions and so forth. And so what they did is they came out with an album 1 week later after we recorded all 12 songs. Now, I believe in '63 it takes a little longer than 1 week to edit, master, print, photography, go to New York, come back, and be out there. And we thought, well, that's a little strange. So my manager, Dale Smallman, brought in the album, put it on my stereo, and Ronnie's standing there with his drumsticks, which he always had in his hands, clipping on top of my stereo. I had one of those nice long console stereos, putting nicks and marks on the top of my stereo as he's playing along. I said, Ronnie, don't do that. Then he goes, but you know something, that doesn't sound like me on those drums. Well, that doesn't sound like my guitar either. We turn to our manager and say, what happened? Well, they overdubbed you boys because you're not in the union. Well, it didn't make any sense. And so on the back of it is a picture of 5 Safaris. It's Jim Fuller, Pat Conley, Ron Wilson, Bob Berryhill, and Jim Pash, our sax player. Well, what was interesting about that is that there were no sax music on when we recorded this thing. And so the Wipeout and Surfer Joe has no sax, right? And so we got to figure out finally that they didn't use our recording at all on that Wipeout album. They put Surfer Joe and Wipeout, the 2 originals, which was us, the 4 of us, and then the rest of it was basically other musicians, you might say. And so what we tried to do was look at it and go, well, gee, that's probably fraud, and so what happened is Jim Pash, his dad, Ed Pash, knew the industry and knew that he could sue them. So he went down to Hollywood and got 5 lawyers, and Park Watkin was the lead lawyer. And he said, oh yeah, that's fraud with his picture on it saying he was on there, but when he wasn't. So that's how we got paid, as we got paid because the lawyers sued Dot and got us thrown off the label, of course, but at least we got money from it because all the money was going into a pot and they weren't giving it to us. And so by getting the court to say that hold everything, you have to pay these boys, and they're under 21, so it meant that your contracts are all void. So Jackie Coogan Laws stepped in, and all of our money went to trust funds, and so we did get paid, but we didn't get the money until we were 18 or got married. So the only money we had at that time was what we were doing from playing, but we were playing so much that we were just having a great time playing, and so it wasn't until I got married that I could get the money because I wasn't 18 yet. And the other guys the same way. When they got married, they got to get their trust funds. So we did get paid after that. And then from then on, we've had a long history of Wipeout being synced to many, many movies, many, many commercials that's made more money than the original 45 made. So, you know, all these 56 years later, we have gotten money for Wipeout. So it's been great.
And who came up with the name The Safaris?
Well, we kind of sat around one day when we were, after we recorded the song, they said, well, what do you want to call yourselves? And I said, well, Safaris is cool, but why don't we change the lettering? S-U-R-F, as in surf, because we were all actually surfers, Surfaris, and so we just kind of made it up on the spot, and that's what was put on the label. In fact, it says, Wipeout's written by the Safaris, and the 4 of us are the Safaris, so that's how it kind of came to be.
I'm sure you're very aware of the impact that song has had on millions, I'm sure, of teenagers that became musicians, myself being one of them.
Right.
That was the first song that I ever played in front of a crowd.
Exactly. Wow.
And wow. If you want to call 7th grade music class a crowd. You know?
Yeah. They are.
But me and a drummer, snare drummer, he had a snare drum, and so that was my first taste of actually performing. And you know, but every band, all the guitar players, all the drummers, that song is I don't care how good you are, it touches all of them. Mm-hmm. And they all want to play on it, you know. Yeah. And the drum solo is, you know, we have an iconic riff award at the Musicians Hall of Fame.
Right.
And that's one of the few songs that I know that could actually have 2 iconic riffs in it, because the guitar was so important to so many people, and the drum solo was obviously off the chart, you know.
Well, it's I get every time we do a concert, someone will walk up and say, that's the first song I learned from my guitar teacher, that's the first song I learned from my drum teacher, and then I'll have the drum teachers come up and the guitar teachers come up and say, this is the song I teach my people first, because it really creates discipline with all the drumming and the guitar and the breaks. They have to count and do all that, but it's so simple, You know, it can be learned by a 7th grader very easily, but yet it has that impression. I mean, I've even seen it on some of the shows on television where they'll have a drum set sitting on the stage, and someone will come up and play Wipeout as their audition piece, because it just has that iconic feeling, and it makes everybody smile. Everybody is enjoying the song, and no matter how somebody plays it, they still get up and dance because it's a great song. And there's probably been over 1,000 BMI versions of Wipeout that have been played. And I heard James Taylor said, "Boy, I wish they'd play my song like that." But anyway, they've played that, and so when I go to listen to an album, it'll have a copy of Wipeout. Wow, it's different from ours, but it's still good. And it's like the movie Surf's Up, which is a cartoon with Jeff Bridges in the lead part. It's got 2 versions of Wipeout, and one in the middle and one at the end.
So, have you had some incredible guitar players come up to you and tell you basically what I did as well? You know, not a novice, but somebody like a Clapton or somebody like that.
Well, yeah. I was at a club where we were playing with the Ventures, and there was Noki Edwards and Bob Bogle and Don and the drummer, and they're all standing there going, "Bob, thank you for putting Wipeout together. It's extended our career 10 years." Yeah. So, I mean, it's just one of those things.
And did you know Dick Dale?
Oh yeah, Dick Dale was a big influence on us originally. We were only 15, and he was all of 24, so he was an experienced guy compared to us. We went down to Harmony Park and listened to him play, and that's where we saw our first reverb unit, the outboard tank, the Offender, and the first time we saw the Showman amp, which is named after Dick Dale.
Yeah, right.
And so we saw him play the amp and the reverb and get up there and just burn it, and we're going, wow, we got to do that. So we went home and bought those things.
Now he covered Wipeout too, didn't he?
Oh yeah, he's covered it. I just about don't know anybody who hasn't covered it in some way or fashion. So we I've heard it many times. I'll be walking down the street at a club and I'll hear it coming out of the club by a local band that's playing it. So it's one of those songs that just fits at everybody's genre. You know, I'm waiting to walk down Nashville and hear it. I'm working on that one.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if you heard it anywhere. It is one of those songs.
Yeah.
And so you guys are still touring.
Right, yeah. Well, you know, unfortunately, 3 of the members of the band have passed away. And so I myself, sort of the last man standing. I have my 2 sons in the band. One is a drummer, one's a guitar player. And my wife of 53 years is playing bass for me. She started playing bass for me back in 2000, or actually 1990. She's been playing all these years with me. So it's really great because my sons grew up listening to the music because they were just little guys, and here's my stereo, and we're sitting out there playing together. I bought a set of drums for them, and I bought guitars for them, and we'd all sit around as a family band, and finally they've grown up and have joined the band and playing with us. So we're just having a great time touring, and even if the tour is a bust, we're still on vacation because we're a family. It works out great that way. Yeah.
Well, man, thank you for doing this show for me. It's me personally, it's one of those songs, like I said, that it had a big impact on my life, and so many others, and can't wait till the award show. I think you'll see once you're inducted how much it meant here to people in Nashville as well.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that, meeting all the guys that are going to be there and the fans and whoever's out there.
Well, thanks so much for doing it, man. Thank you. Come back next week when we'll have another show of Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage.